Uh, Good evening, Ward 2 residents and staff. Welcome to the first virtual Ward 2 meeting of your representatives. Bear with us, please, through this presentation. None of us have done this way before, but we certainly felt it was important. In the midst of all this COVID, we felt a little bit separated from our constituents. Usually we have spring ward meetings, but we were unable to do that this year for obvious reasons. So we are proceeding on this format, and I hope that it satisfies everyone. I am Melanie Rummel. I am your Ward 2 representative on the City Council, along with Ted Notes. I was elected to this position, actually in a contested election in 2017. I am finishing up my second term, so I've been on for almost 4 years, and I'm eligible for a third term of 2 years, and that election will be coming up next April, not this November with the presidential election, but in April. Let me just say a little bit about myself. I'm a lifelong Lake Forest resident. I have served on as president of the District 67 School Board in the past. Other relevant service that I have done in the community, I've been on the Lake Forest Open Lands Board for almost 30 years and was chairman of Lake Forest Open Lands. In addition to that, I have served on various committees. I was on the city's cable commission prior to that, and involved in numerous other boards and committees throughout the city. Catholic Charities Women's Board, to mention one. I am an attorney in Lake Forest. I'm of counsel with Lesser Lutry, Pasquesi, and Howe. And I have also been an adjunct law professor at Loyola Law School. We're delighted, and I'm honored to be able to represent this ward. In terms of my duties on the City Council, I am on the legal committee. I'm the city's representative to that committee. I served for the past basically 4 years on the Public Works Committee as well, and then I was recently tapped by the mayor to chair the city's brand new Environmental Sustainability Committee, and I'm very honored to be entrusted with that very important committee and getting it off the ground to a good start. We had our first meeting in June, and I'll be telling you a little bit more about that committee as we go forward. And so now I will let you, there will be questions at the end of this meeting. You can submit written questions. Alderman Notes and I do have a presentation, and we'll be switching back and forth through some of the slides that you'll see on the screen. And so with that, let's hope things go smoothly with technology, and we'll proceed. I'm going to let Ted introduce himself.
Thank you, Melanie. And this is the first opportunity I've had to speak to the ward directly since the election back in March, which squeaked in just ahead of the COVID shutdown. So I want to thank everybody in the ward for your support, and it's my honor to be serving for you. My tenure on City Council began last October when I was appointed by the mayor and City Council to fill the seat vacated by Tim Newman, and I was thrilled to be asked to run again to fill it on a permanent basis, which occurred this last March. Coming on to City Council, I had served on the Zoning Board of Appeals as well as the chairman of the Building Review Board for 6 years. So it is my pleasure to step into this new role as your alderman, and I look forward to representing you.
Next slide. Well, look, we did this already. But we will be doing our presentation, and then we'll switch over to questions. So the important thing about this is that we have a balanced budget. Our fiscal year, um, we are right now in the 2021 fiscal year. So, you know, you always look at when does the fiscal year end, and that's the fiscal year that you refer to. So our budget that we're working on now will end in the spring of 2021. Our fiscal year runs from May 1st to April 30th. So the good news is that we had our AAA bond rating affirmed once again, and our reserves had a major part to play in that. We did redo our some of our bond ratings, our bonds, and the refinancing saved the city and its taxpayers $1.3 million over the term of the bonds that we refinanced, and it's at an interest rate of 1.75%, which is pretty significant. Our reserves assured that we were able to get through, so far, knock wood, the bluff failure at the beach, and so far we are managing to have a balanced budget through this COVID-19 pandemic. We also have been very proactive in addressing the public safety pension costs, which have continued to be a concern for the city. We are phasing in a new funding model that will ultimately provide what we believe will be substantial cost savings over the long term. In fact, our finance director, Elizabeth Holub, is somewhat of a pioneer in working through some of this, and has our model is being adopted by some other communities, is my understanding. In spite of all of this and the COVID problems, we still have managed to invest $10 million in capital investments for the current year. The Burr storm sewer project, however, which is estimated at $5.2 million, was deferred to this next budget cycle so that we could better assess the long-term financial impacts of COVID-19. We are hoping now that that Burr project, and I'll talk a little further about it, will qualify, at least half of it, we may qualify for a state grant, stormwater grant, to help us deal with that. But it won't be until this coming fiscal year of 2022. I have some other good news, which is that the city just received a COVID relief check from the government for about $630,000. So we are getting some help along the way, as are other municipalities. Next slide, please. So this one, unfortunately, is a little bit tough to see, but the budget is balanced. This is the city-wide budget. So we're talking, and then I'm going to go to the general fund in a few more slides, but this is the whole budget for the city. So the total city budget is, as you can see, about $87.5 million a year. Our revenues to make that up are mostly property taxes, as you can see in that citywide fund. They make up 34% of the revenues that come in. Our charges for services make up 25% of the revenue that comes in. On the expenses side, personnel costs account for about 41% of citywide expenses. So when we say personnel costs, we're including salaries, wages, employment and employee insurance in that box. So and the employer pension costs. So that makes up, as it always has, 41% of our citywide expenses. in recent years, we have cut back on our staffing, and that has helped us with our budget. Next slide. So now we're going to the general fund revenue. So this is the main operating fund of the city. So this is broken out a little bit differently. The property tax revenue, as you can see, accounts for about 56% of the general fund. And then when you look at the personnel costs in the general fund, it makes up more than 70% of the general fund when you go to expenses on the general fund. I think we have one that also shows the expenses by specific departments. Can we go to that slide? Yes, here we go. So as you can see in the general fund, here is where the tax dollars are going. Out of the general fund, 22% to public works, and then public safety, police and fire account for 52% of those general fund expenses, with public works, of course, making up 22% of those expenses. And then we can go to slide 7. And this shows the expenses by department citywide. So it's slightly different. The public works portion is about the same as it is in the general fund. Police and fire look a little bit smaller because this pie now also adds in the Parks and Rec portion of our budget. Parks and Rec does not come out of the general fund, so that's why you didn't see it in the previous slide. So this gives you a pretty good idea citywide of expenses by department. And that concludes my portion. And now Ted, Alderman Notes, is going to talk about some pension costs.
Thank you, Melanie. On a technical standpoint, am I able to be seen? Okay. So as Melanie indicated, I'm going to be covering discussion on the city's pension liabilities. As everyone is well aware, the state's pension situation is a high priority. The city's managing this diligently. The annual budget for pension contributions totals about $6.8 million, or just under 8% of the city's $87 million budget. There are roughly 800 employees that are participating in that pension program, of which about 360 are retired at this time. The pension is, there are 3 different pension funds which city employees participate in. General, the IMRF, the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund, is the bulk of employees of the city, with police and fire having their separate funds. The fund guidelines are stipulated by Illinois statute, but managed directly by the IMRF. Contributions the city is making to its employees is managed by a pension subcommittee of 5 members, including the mayor and our finance chair. The subcommittee relies on an outside independent actuary firm to help it assess its ongoing pension liability needs. The state of Illinois operates with guidance and a mandate that by 2040, 90% of pension liabilities will be funded. The city does not feel that is appropriate enough levels of contributions to meet its ongoing liabilities, and so actually is making contributions closer to, well, not closer to, but we're operating under making contributions that will achieve an 80% funding rate, and that would be maintained and sustained by 2035. The slide we're looking at in front of us shows back in 2016 based upon what those actuarial assumptions would look like for the police pension fund operating under the state's guidelines. And that would be the red line, and the blue line reflects the Melanie, could you nod and make sure you can hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Great, thank you. There was some question about technical difficulties. Great.
Yeah, I know. They told me I'm breaking up too,
Okay.
but I moved my computer a little closer. Am I breaking up? Maybe Jason can answer whether we're coming through okay.
I can hear you both fine.
Good news. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. The downside of this virtual world, and the blue line in this chart reflects funding at the city's current funding rate. Next slide, please. In front of us, the next topic I'd like to cover is the economic benefits of being a resident in Lake Forest and having such a well-managed city and having our AAA bond rating. The slide here shows the overall tax rate for residents of the city relative to a lot of our neighboring communities. That includes both, actually, I believe all of these are actually Lake County, but you'll see that Lake Forest among them is under 5 or under 6%. Next slide, please. This slide is showing the average tax rate is roughly 1.8% of a home's market value. This compares very favorably to the average taxes paid for these neighboring communities. Next slide, please. And then based on an average home value of $800,000, the average tax bill is under $15,000, again, among the lowest relative property tax bills that you would see among our neighboring communities. Next slide, please. As you look at your tax bill, the tax rate for the city of Lake Forest is roughly 5.5%. The 22% of that goes to city expenses, 3% to the library. The largest taxing body after the city, or ahead of the city, is this District 67, followed by the high school 115. Next slide, please. The city has been going to great lengths over recent years and with a heightened effort over the last year to really create a very efficient and seamless electronic capacity, which is really starting to be integrated and seen on its website. The city is making all of these documents, whether it's the financial statements and budgets and annual reports, available on the city's website. It's a fairly user-friendly format, and again, efforts are being made to continue improving it. Next slide, please. Being in the middle of COVID, the interesting things have developed, both that were foreseen, unforeseen, and still yet to be determined. When the governor issued his stay-at-home order back in March, the city council sat down and reevaluated our budget and taking a concerted look at aspects of revenue sources that could be impacted and modifying the budget accordingly in preparation for these potential ramifications. Efforts were made focusing on sales tax and income taxes, as well as parks and recreation. As of today, 4 to 5 months into the pandemic, the outlook is actually looking very favorable relative to city financials, with sales taxes contributing such a relatively small proportion to the city's revenue with roughly $2.6 million. That's only 3% of our annual projected revenue budget. So while the city is, we're looking for opportunities where the city can certainly improve sales tax revenue generating capabilities, the fact is because it is such a small component of our revenue source, the impact on sales is mitigated. Sales tax revenue is received 90 days between when it's received. Based on May results, the city had forecast its May sales tax revenues at $89,000, which was about 50% of the original budget. May results actually achieved $120,000 of sales tax, or 69% of budget. The city is looking at a number of ways that we can help use the city's resources to help support our local businesses. That includes a grant program to small local businesses that actually was not as utilized as the city expected, and we're looking at new opportunities where we might be able to look at helping out, making sure that our businesses continue to thrive or survive through the COVID pandemic. Next slide, please. The unforeseen benefit of COVID actually was the fact that the housing market improved dramatically over anything we could have possibly expected. At the time earlier this year when City Council sat down to review the budget, we actually had anticipated the home sales market declining. For the 4 months between May of this year and August, there were actually 238 taxable property transfers, which was actually 65, in those 4 months, 65% of the preceding 12-month period. And that the average revenue per each transfer was actually up 5%. The benefit is that these numbers are well exceeding budget. So while, again, it's that silver lining, it's our understanding that that velocity is slowed now that school has started, and it remains to be seen the long-term implications of whether families are continuing to look to move to the suburbs from the city and balancing that with what could be a more prolonged work-at-home lifestyle where fewer people are commuting into the city and making the 30-mile distance from the loop less of an issue for them. Next slide, please. I've actually covered this, so Mike, if you could advance me again. Thank you. Moving off from finances, Melanie and I are going to start covering some of the projects that are going on around the ward specifically, but also throughout the community. If you haven't been by South Park, there's been phenomenal work being done to make some significant improvements to the amenities at the park. They've added a walking trail, basketball court, bocce courts, batting cages. There's sort of a fitness center with various different activities. And all of that's getting wrapped up in the next couple of weeks and really looks phenomenal. The south end of the project, which is currently wooded and has some very desirable trees and whatnot, also has quite a bit of less desirable understory of buckthorn and honeysuckle that the city is going to be working to get rid of and make the overall park a real a nice upgrade to what's there now. Next slide, please. Melanie, this takes us to storm sewers.
Well, it's my pleasure to cover the sewers. This is a general slide that talks about some of the storm sewer projects, again, that impacted our ward. Last summer, we were delighted to be able to complete the sewer project that went down Old Elm and served a lot of the Forest Hill Timber Lane residents. That came in on time and actually under budget, and knock wood, thus far, it seems to be working. We haven't heard any more complaints from residents. We actually moved this up a full year in the budget cycle because the flooding was so dramatic. It was actually coming in the front doors of some of the residents. So we were glad to move that up and successfully complete that project for those residents. People who live on Waveland and in Whispering Oaks, the Whispering Oaks area and Valley in the ponds know very well that there is a large project on the East Skokie Drainage District that started on July 1st and is projected to end by the end of November. But one should note that this is a project not being done by the city. It's part of the East Skokie Drainage District, which is a separate taxing body with oversight, I believe, by the Lake County Board. So it's not the city's project, although it certainly will have an impact on homeowners, especially along who border the East Skokie River. There was significant erosion occurring to people's yards. You know, I've walked that area and seen where the river was coming up to some people's back doors, and certainly large chunks of their property was being eroded away. So we're grateful that the East Skokie Drainage District has moved forward and found the funding for the south part of that project. Unfortunately, there are no funds available currently for the north half of that river. So that's the half that really impacts a lot of the residents in the ponds area. But seems to be coming along. It's pretty dramatic. It's kind of interesting to watch if you go there. And then there's the Burr Oak Storm Sewer Project that we're looking to fund, and I'll address that in more detail in another slide. And then, of course, the Deerpath 41 flooding. We are looking to the state to fund that project, and we could begin as early as 2021. This has been a project that's been on the state's slate for years. And we're hoping that it will finally be addressed, and I'll talk a little bit about that as we go along also. So please advance the slides. So here's this Burr Oak Storm Sewer Project. This was this is an interesting project. Again, residents in Burr Oak and those businesses along Western Avenue. Alden Lane is impacted. Some of the residents on the east side of Green Bay Road are impacted by this. Certainly the people in Crystal Point and the apartment building on Northwestern Avenue are very much impacted by this project. It's not a project directly impacting residents of the second ward, but I wanted to just point it out because it's kind of innovative technology that we are looking at. This total project is estimated at $5.2 million. We, as I mentioned earlier, took it out of this year's budget because we simply couldn't afford it when the estimates came in way over budget. The issue here is moving the storm water from the west side of the tracks along Western Avenue to the east side of the tracks, where that storm water then travels underneath, I think, the East Campus playing fields and finds its way to discharge into a ravine that's actually in Lake Bluff. The issue is slowing down that flow because there's only a 36-inch pipe that runs under the train tracks. So, and it's not enough to accommodate the flash flooding that occurs in that area. So the city has proposed to use this storm trap, which is basically a detention pond that would be installed underneath Western Avenue to handle and store that rainwater and then discharge it into this 36-inch pipe that will go underneath the tracks. The other exciting part about this is that it's environmentally more friendly because the solids will fall out to the bottom of this vault, and so they won't, and many of those are pollutants. So hopefully they will not end up in the ravines and into our Lake Michigan drinking water. It's my understanding that then this is sort of vacuumed out periodically to take those solids out of this detention pond altogether. So I just thought it was an interesting project. It's very innovative, and the city is expecting to get half of that project covered by an Illinois grant, which is very exciting and makes it much more affordable for our for the city to move ahead with this. And part of the reason that it is appealing for a grant is the environmental aspects of it. So very interesting project. Hopefully it will be going forward with this grant, and so you could be looking for it. And hopefully it will alleviate all of the basement flooding, building, lobby flooding, yard flooding, garage flooding, and I know a lot of parking lot flooding in the Crystal Point area. Advanced slide, please. Well, here's the picture that we've all seen from time to time, unfortunately. Flooded viaduct under Route 41 on Deerpath Road. And we've been trying to address this for many years, and the state is, we hope, going to come up with some money for us finally to begin this project as early as January of 2021, with an estimated completion date of December of 2022. So I mention this because part of this project is actually where the where some of the pump station is going to be is in Ward 2 off of Owani Road on the southwest corner of Deerpath there, where it meets up with this viaduct. And it's also an interesting project because part of it means that we are going to be putting a detention pond in the golf course, so that, again, the water has some place to go and then dissipate somewhat. The pump station will be an important part of pumping that water to the detention pond, and hopefully, and then dissipating. If there's too much overflow, it will actually flow eventually into the Skokie River. So look forward to that. We still don't know exactly where how we will divert the traffic on there. My hunch is, our hunch is that some of it will be diverted to Wesley Road, but this is a project that's very much needed and that will benefit the entire city. And it's a $12+ million project that IDOT is doing. It won't cost the city dollars. It's a state project. And it's our understanding that the bids were opened and that Burr Construction was awarded the bid. Actually, it hasn't been awarded, but I guess they were the low bidder anyway, and they're still in the process of reviewing it and hopefully awarding the bid by Thanksgiving and moving forward with this very important project for the entire city. Please advance the slides. Ravines. The city has placed ravine maintenance and restoration sort of on the priority list of things that we need to address. Again, keeping in mind that much of the storm water from the east side of Green Bay Road, so much of Ward 2, flows into the various ravines that we have throughout the city. 90% of these ravines actually are privately owned and maintained by the private property owner. That being said, there are some ordinances that regulate the ravines. For example, we do have some setback requirements if you border a ravine, and we have the same types of setback requirements if you own lake property. And also, we do not allow fencing to be constructed in the ravine, although that ordinance didn't come into existence until I think it was 2012 or 2014. So if you see some fencing in ravines, it's because it's grandfathered in there, but there is a way, hopefully they will fall into obsolescence at some point because they can't be fully restored. We have some projects that we're looking for. We just completed the Rosemary Ravine project, and this meant that we redid the culvert over that project and slope bed stabilization, and then restored the plantings using native plants, which are much better at holding bluffs from eroding and also absorb quite a bit of rainwater. We're also looking to repair the culvert under Ringwood Road, and that is a potential 2021 project. I think it's already been put out to bid, and looking that may be a significant part of our budget, again estimated at $1 million. Let's see what else I had to say about that. Well, there are future projects. There are other ravines, Rockefeller, Lock Lane, Westminster, numerous other ones. The one that we're really looking for in fiscal year 22 will be the Rockefeller Road ravine project. So again, Ringwood ravine repair in our 21 budget, and then looking for Rockefeller to be in the 2022 budget. So we're also looking for grant opportunities. Again, these are stormwater issues, and there are stormwater grants out there to be had. We're hoping to be able to apply for some of those and qualify on an annual basis. Maintaining ravines, although they're public, it is a challenge. The challenge is getting the equipment down there. There are access challenges. A lot of this is private property. So that covers some of the ravines, other than to say that the green projects are putting in native plants and the potential of maybe some riffle structures in some of the stream beds in order to aerate the water and slow down the flow. If you slow down the flow, obviously you have less erosion. So that's what we're looking at in terms of ravines, and we have our quite a set of ravines here within the second ward, and of course they also go well into the first ward. So I'm going to turn it over to Alderman Notes now to talk about the beach.
Thank you, Melanie. A couple key topics on the beach primarily relate to erosion levels. If anyone has been down to the lake, it is readily visible that the lake is much higher than it has been in certainly the recent memory. And the implications of that are particularly on high wind days with winds blowing in out of the northeast, where it's pushing waves up against the shoreline. It's really taken a toll on our wonderful beach improvements. And there's nothing we can do about the lake level, but we've engaged several our requests for proposals from engineering firms to make recommendations on longer term strategies on what we can do to help mitigate the situation so that on these high wind, high water level days, the damage to the beach is minimized. We're hoping to see proposals in the next month or so that will give us a better idea of scope of work and cost necessary to make sure that we're preserving this wonderful amenity of the community. Another aspect of the beach that developed over the summer was heavy rainfalls and water saturations of the bluff that caused some sliding to occur. The southern stair entrance was taken out of commission for safety purposes, and among that is something the city council will certainly be looking at on the process of stabilizing the bluff and getting that stair access route replaced. Positive news on the beach, which is again one of those silver linings to COVID, was with so many people staying home and working from home during the summer and travel, the travel plans keeping them closer to home. The number of attendees and beachgoers was double and in some cases triple what it's been over the last 4 to 5 years. So the beach was highly utilized and again recognized as an important amenity of the city that we will need to be making sure we preserve and maintain. Mike, to help keep this moving along, let's go ahead and advance along down to, I think I cut, yeah, let's jump to gas lights. The city has roughly 431 gas lights located around town. The slide 30 shows the location around the ward of these locations. Conversion work began, as I said, back in 2018, and so far the old mill area, the area around the senior center, has been completed, and Villa Turicum is now completed. A lot of effort was made to find an LED bulb that was efficient but generated comparable light and ambience to the gas lights it's replacing. The cost is estimated to be roughly $1,100 to $1,200, not estimated, the cost of converting these former gas lights to LEDs is about $1,100 to $1,200 per pole, and the city forecasts that the payback on the savings in gas costs and maintenance will pay back that cost within 13 years. So a lot of great benefits economically as well as environmentally from the conversion. Mike, if you could jump us to the street repairs, please. This is a fairly interesting subject, and probably one I get asked about most from residents asking, how does the city go about repairing streets? The city engages a third-party contractor to go out and very systematically and quantitatively assess the conditions of the 120 miles of roads here in Lake Forest. The slide shows their van, which is equipped with some fascinating sensors and recording devices that segments the city streets into 880-foot linear stretches, and then provides a score by which that the condition of that road is assessed. The city targets that the condition of their streets is roughly what they measure by as a 77, and you'll see on this slide that over the last 4 years that we've either met or exceeded that. On the next slide, if you could, Mike, please. What does a 77 mean? This slide provides an example of what a road considering needing repair is. This is Alden Lane on the left, which was rated in a 59. The picture on the right is of Oak Knoll. That was rated in 82. With a cost to resurface the streets being fairly expensive, the city's been spending roughly $1 million to $1.2 million a year over the last couple of years on repaving streets. We, being mindful of making the most out of our assets and extending the life as long as possible, also undertakes a very aggressive patching program, spending about $250,000 a year to help stay off the need to actually do a more thorough resurfacing of a street. Mike, if you could take me to the next slide. This slide shows over the last year, this year, the streets that were completed within the ward, and all of that work for the season is now done. Mike, if you could advance, please. That concludes my comments for the evening. Melanie, was there anything else that you had before we open this up for public comment?
Yeah, I was going to talk about environmental sustainability and our recycle program. So I'm pleased to announce that this past January, the mayor announced the creation of the Environmental Sustainability Committee. I referred to it a little bit earlier. It's a full standing committee of the City Council, which demonstrates the commitment that the city is making to environmental sustainability and environmental initiatives. We are hoping to address numerous areas of impacting the environment. We started out, we didn't have our first meeting, as I said, until June because of COVID. And we have been working with MIST Environmental with Mike Stopka and his staff so that we approach this on a measured basis. There are so many projects and initiatives that benefit the environment that are out there that we couldn't possibly tackle them all at once. So we even sent out community-wide surveys to establish the most important initiatives of the committee. We are in the process of finalizing those priorities, and eventually, hopefully very soon, we will have those priorities whittled down as to what we can begin to proceed to implement in this budget cycle in particular. So right now we're very focused on public works projects where we might be able to make them more environmentally sustainable in the upcoming budget. We also will be looking at such projects as plastic bag reuse, single-use plastics, plastic bags, things of that nature down the road. But right now we're very focused on getting into this budget cycle with some environmentally sustainable practices. The staff and the city have really embraced this initiative, and we've been working very closely with them. As you can see throughout this presentation, a lot of what the city is doing does have an environmental impact. And so it's a very important place to start. We have also already begun a program with Commonwealth Edison, and it's been approved by the City Council, and it's a community solar program. So look forward to more news on this in early October. But basically what you can do is subscribe to this solar program through Commonwealth Edison, where they will use part of your energy will come from solar energy, and it actually can result in a decrease in your electric bill of about $100 and some odd a year. So while it may not be a huge savings, it still is a move in the right direction. It's been embraced by the City Council, And it's a way to not only decrease your electric bill, but also be part of a very important environmentally sustainable project of solar energy. And if you can go to the next slide. Many of you are probably aware that we are very grateful to the Lake Forest Garden Club, who gave us a grant of $110,000 in order to reduce our recycling costs. So the history of this is we used to actually make money on recycling. I think, like $110,000 a year, but recently China stopped accepting a lot of recyclables and demanding that our recyclables be cleaner. And so it's become more expensive to recycle. I've seen, in fact, pictures of actually people hand picking through a stream of recyclables where they pick out things that aren't appropriate to be in our recycling containers. So the goal of this initiative is to reduce our costs to of the city and non-recyclable items in the waste stream from 25% to 10%. And that will save the city at least $50,000 a year. But again, it's the right thing to do. So what are we not supposed to be putting in the trash in our recycle bin? Well, first of all, remember that when you have an empty container that it needs to be rinsed first before it goes in the recycle bin. Cardboard boxes should be compressed before they're put in the recycle bin. Please, please don't put those plastic grocery bags in the recycling bin. They can be returned to the grocery store. I know Jewel takes them. I think other grocery stores take them as well. And included in those plastic bags are not just the bags from the grocery store, but for example, the plastic bag that wraps your newspaper can't be recycled. The cleaner bags where your clothes come from the cleaner in a bag, that cannot be recycled as well. Styrofoam can't be recycled. If you look at the bottom of any of your food containers and they say they have a number on the bottom, the number 6, those plastics cannot be recycled. So those are a lot of your food containers. Additionally, if you have a food container, the great example is the cardboard pizza box and it's stained with grease and maybe a little cheese and marinara sauce. That cannot be put in your recycle bin. So please don't do that. Also tanglers like hangers and extension cords can't go into your recycle bins. So, so hopefully we can clean up our recycling and reduce our recycling costs and do that as a community. And it's also the green thing to do as we move forward. So on that note, also, I want to just do a call out to, again, the Garden Club, and I know Marcus Norman has been working on this, and keep your eye out for Bart the Cart, who is carrying this recycle message forward throughout the city. There are signs, he's on our website, and there will be more coming from Bart the Cart to help us correctly recycle. And so I think that concludes what Ted and I had prepared for this evening. And but we're anxious to address any concerns that you have. If Ted and I can't answer your questions, or if you'd like more detail on anything we've covered, we also have a full bevy of the city staff on this call, and they're ready to jump in anytime. So thank you for your patience while we went through our presentations, and we look forward to hearing from you. City Manager Wisha, do we have any questions?
Sure. Thank you, Alderman Rummel and Notes. We do have a few questions that are coming in through the Q&A function here in the chat, and we also received several questions in advance of the meeting. So I'll begin with those. Alderman Rummel and Alderman Notes, feel free to let me know if you'd like to jump in on these. If not, I'd be happy to pull up the appropriate staff to have them assist in answering the questions. So two questions that we received prior to the meeting, which probably have the same answer regarding traffic control in their neighborhoods. The first question was, or more of a statement, I'd like to start a dialogue about installing stop signs at intersections on Valley and Buena Roads in the H.O. Stone subdivision. The second question, similar, is what can we do to slow traffic on Beverly Place? And to answer both of those questions, the city does have an interdisciplinary committee made up of police department, public works, and engineering staff who routinely reviews requests for additional traffic control measures. We will collect data on volume and speed of vehicular traffic in the impacted area, and we'll use that information to evaluate, again, the need for additional control measures. So our Chief of Police, Rob Copeland, oversees that committee. And so for those on the call, if you're listening and have submitted those questions, or for others who may have similar traffic control questions in their neighborhood, I'd encourage you to please reach out and contact Deputy Chief Rob Copeland. His contact information is available on the city website, and he can work with you then to evaluate, again, any potential need for additional signage or looking at speed limits.
Can I just jump in here a minute? Because this is one that's right in my neighborhood. It's Beverly. And I have received comments in the past that there is concern about speeding on Beverly. And so a couple of years ago, I know there were speed signs out there and the police were monitoring the speeders along Beverly. And what was interesting, that most of the speeding tickets and speeders who they stopped were individuals who lived in that neighborhood. So, so my plea would be, watch the speed. You're in residential neighborhoods. There are children playing, especially now when children aren't in school with COVID. So they're out on the streets, they're skateboarding, they're riding their bikes. Watch your speed limits in these residential areas, please. There are young families, there are people walking dogs, there are mothers pushing babies in strollers. We're all walking more. So please, please respect your neighbors, slow down.
Great, great message. Thank you, Alderman Rummel. Another question that was submitted prior to tonight's meeting is what is city staff policy about returning phone calls? So maybe I'll jump in and take that as well. I will say that it's very important to us to be responsive to any resident or inquiries that we receive. We strive to provide a response to any inquiry within 24 hours or less. And certainly we've had some challenges over the last few months with COVID and limited staffing being in the building, but certainly that is our expectation. And so I would just encourage anyone who's interested in this, who may have submitted the question, if you think there are any concerns with that, feel free to contact me directly as well. Another question that came in prior to the meeting tonight is, when will the north end of the Skokie Drainage District project be completed?
I can answer that. We don't know. As I mentioned, it's not a city project, and currently there are no funds this East Skokie Drainage District does not have funds to allocate to that project. So I'm afraid we can't answer that question tonight.
Okay. Great. A question that was submitted a few minutes ago is there any plan to continue the curb and gutter up Old Elm from Timber to Sheridan Road? Many residents would truly appreciate it. Is there a way of funding it so we could go ahead with the project? And
I don't see it
Please.
in our current budget, but I will turn that over to staff to answer whether there are any future plans to move that curb further. Yes, indeed, there were curbs installed on portions of Old Elm Road that was part of this Old Elm Forest Hill sewer project. And so I will turn it over to the staff to answer if there are plans to move that curb further to the east.
Sure. And with that, I'll introduce Public Works Director Michael Thomas.
Thank you. Good evening, Alderman Rummel, Alderman Notes. Good evening, residents at home. The quick answer to that question is no. There is nothing in our 5-year capital plan to install curbs from Timber to Sheridan along Old Elm. Typically, if residents are interested in adding what we refer to as a piece of infrastructure that doesn't already exist. So for example, street lights or sidewalks or curb and gutter. All of that is put through a process referred to as a SSA, a special service area, whereby the residents get together, we, the city, work with them, determine what the estimated cost would be, and those improvements actually then are paid for by the residents. They are not paid for by the city, they're paid for by the residents. The most recent one we had was installing a sanitary sewer up north off of Waukegan Road about 5 or 6 years ago. But I'd be happy to talk to anyone about that if they would like to email me. We've got information we can share on the process that residents can go through if in fact they feel they have a majority of homeowners on their block or in an area that would like this work done. So we would be happy to do so.
Thank you, Mike.
Alderman Rummel and Notes, at this time, there are no additional questions. We can give it another minute to see if anyone has anything else they'd like to ask.
Can you tell us how many residents were on this Zoom meeting?
Well, it's, fluctuated throughout, but I would say around 25 residents that have participated.
Nice to know, because that's, probably about average of what we would have had if this were live, to tell you the truth. Maybe down by about 10 or so, I would think. But it's nice to know that the word got out there and that people were able to participate. So that's all good news.
Jason, I think you mentioned that this is being recorded so that if anyone wanted to review it again, that they could, or if they missed it.
That is correct. So we will tomorrow post the entirety of this ward meeting on the city's website. So anyone who's interested in viewing it, or for those who are currently in the audience and know of others who would have liked to participate but were unable to for whatever scheduling conflict may have existed, please let them know as well that this is available for anyone to view.
Right, and I think that's important because the time was changed on this particular ward meeting. So you can view this, the city is going to make a point of getting this meeting available online very quickly so that anyone who would have liked to attend from the beginning and was unable to can still see the meeting and the information that we were discussing.
And we do appreciate everyone's patience and understanding and accommodating the revised start time on account of the presidential debate, which is starting in just under an hour.
Right, we had a little competition tonight. Imagine that.
Jason, before we close out, I want to just extend my deepest gratitude to everyone on staff who helped prepare tonight's presentation and answer Alderman Rummel's and my questions to get it shaped up and ready for tonight.
I agree with that and second the thanks that Alderman Notes extended. And beyond preparing for tonight, thank you to the staff in general for everything you do for our community to keep it running as you have, especially through these very trying, unprecedented times. And to our finance department, it's certainly good news to see our budget and our expenses in the condition that they are in, thanks to very careful budgeting and monitoring from the city staff, because we would not be able to do any of these projects, any of these public work projects, were it not for the careful financial planning that has gone into our budget over the years. And, you know, this isn't just a one-year process. This is something that's been going on with the city for years, our sound fiscal policies that make all of this possible and really help keep Lake Forest the community that it is. And so thank you. If we don't have any more questions, I'd also like to emphasize that Alderman Notes and I are here to serve our residents. And so please call us, contact us, you can email us. You have our cell phone numbers there if you want to call us. We love talking to residents, and whether it's good news or bad news, we want to hear all of it and want to represent you to the best of our ability. And the staff is here to serve you as well. So if you have any questions or comments, if you need help, please don't hesitate to contact us. That's what we're here for. Any more questions?
No, there are no questions at this time.
All right, then I think we can conclude our meeting again with our profound thanks to everyone involved, and best of luck with the other ward meetings. And thank you for attending this evening.
Good night, everybody.